Dimitri, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming to this coast. I mean, we just saw each other at LSI a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, great to see you. First time out here. It's amazing.
Yeah, you and I had early days back in the Potrero days with Joe Urban.
Yeah.
In fact, I think Potrero and you in particular with your team were one of the first squads we highlighted in MedTech ever, and I know it's still online.
Yeah, it's really fun to see. I remember it was just, I think, your nephew and one camera, and it's grown a little bit, let's say it that way.
Just a bit. Well, look, I'm glad you're here. I'm really excited about the platform, the technology, and it started out with, was it John in Singapore? And
Yeah.
you start out with a good story, and it's a legit story. Share that.
Yeah, names change to protect the innocent, but one of our consultants, their brother was on a business trip in Singapore. They started to feel ill, so they had to go to the ICU, and then they needed to get intubated. The doctors botched the intubation, they botched the tracheostomy, and they were without oxygen for 9 minutes, and that caused them to become brain dead. And so our consultant had to fly halfway across the world to pull the plug on their own brother. It seems crazy in this day and age that something like that would happen, and it seems like it should have been totally avoided.
And that's obviously a catastrophic issue.
Yeah.
But there's other issues that are well below that, but also causing challenges in ORs, ICUs, emergency departments, on everyday procedures. So take us through a little bit about the platform.
Yeah, so we're making a handheld robot for tracheal intubation. The idea is that we make all intubations easy. There's about 30 million tracheal intubations every year in the US alone. 20% of them are difficult, and those difficult ones have a high degree of failures and complications. And with our device, any intubation is easy.
Wow. So the technology in intubation science has not changed much. It's actually pretty primeval, isn't it?
Yeah, in the most basic form, the direct laryngoscope looks a bit like a shoehorn, and it's been around for 100 years. And a lot of intubations are still done that way. Now, about 20 some years ago, somebody added a video camera, and video laryngoscopes became a thing. But they still require a lot of skill, a lot of force, because while the video laryngoscope provides you excellent visualization, the tube is still left in the operator's hand. And the skills on that are crazy variable from, on the expert side versus on the more novice side. It's not equal.
And I'm going to guess, like any creative art, there's a distribution curve.
Yep.
Just like whether you're a plumber, whether you're an accountant or a lawyer or anesthesiologist, you're going to have a percentage of the bell curve to the right that are outrageously good, average in the middle, and then those down on the lower left that just are going not to be best in industry.
For sure, yeah. If you look at literature, right, we have in these difficult patients, you look at failure rates of around 10 to 11%, and then you talk to the KOLs and you ask them, like, how often do you fail at this? And they're like, oh, I don't really. So that means if they're close to 100% success, and then the average is 90, that means there's some people way down on that curve. And yeah, it's scary as a patient. One thing the joke we have is, if I ever need to get intubated, we're going to ask Vladimir, my anesthesiologist founder, to do the intubation, because I don't want to risk it having somebody else do it. So
that's a wild card. So let's back up and why this platform is by far superior to what is being done manually today: imaging, navigation, robotics.
Yeah, so our device, it's shaped similar to a video laryngoscope, but it has dual cameras. So we have one camera that's a video laryngoscope, panoramic view, and then we have a robotic endoscope, and that can extend and navigate into the trachea, and then all the clinician has to do is advance the endotracheal tube over the endoscope, and it makes intubations really easy because using the joystick and buttons is really an intuitive way to navigate an endoscope. It's much easier than it is to navigate a bronchoscope today. And the other big advantage we have is normally if you were to intubate with something like a bronchoscope, you start out, at the beginning of the mouth. With our device, we put the endoscope only about 4 centimeters from where it needs to go. And after it goes through the vocal cords, it's a straight shot, through the trachea. And that makes it, like I said, really easy to use. As we go along, we will add an AI element where all you do is press and hold a button, and the AI will navigate the endoscope for you. And in that one, I like to joke, I've had her do it. My 7-year-old can intubate our difficult mannequin that many experienced clinicians struggle to intubate using their conventional tools. So.
You used the word in there as we talk about robotics early in that statement, intuitive, right? So when we think about robotics, at least in healthcare med tech, we all tend to index towards a large format robot.
Yep.
And you and I were chatting, it's really interesting that, be careful if you're a large format robotic platform, because if you start to get traction, Intuitive sees that, they're coming after that market. They've got the brain trust, the resources, the money, distribution network, dry powder, everything.
Yeah, for sure. It makes sense, right? If you find a procedure that is well suited for robotics that they're not in yet, but your robot is a similar form factor to theirs, it will take them nothing to adapt it to that.
Right, but this specialization that you're getting into now, I'm watching people like Josh DeFonso from Mandera, yourself, are going at it from the other end, highly specialized, smaller format, single-use, disposable, give or take, plays well into the economics and solves problems that generally require a high level of skill to execute on.
Right.
But when you introduce AI, robotics, imaging, and navigation, it is an equalizer.
For sure, yeah, and that's the idea, is to make it, from a skills perspective, make it accessible so the lowest end of that bell curve, it can operate as well as the top, but then also keep it affordable. And because I think I see opportunities here all along for a smaller form factor robots that can do highly specialized things really well, that you can have, as I like to say, a storage closet full of robots that do one particular thing really well, but they're affordable, and you can only buy the part of the robot that you need in order, where your volume justifies doing it, as opposed to buying this very expensive general machine that has to do a lot of things well, and that you have to use it in procedures where it may be suboptimal just to keep up with the volume, just to justify having it. I think that's, over time, that's going to, it's a broken model.
Although it was the first model that came to market, and markets tend to get hostage to something that was successful and never give it a chance to evolve. And to your point, a robot starts to run to $2.2 to $2.4 million plus annual maintenance contract, because it has to do so many things to justify procedures, and it might not be ideal, or it might not fit the let's call it the case acuity, high level, mid level, low level. But here we're immediately answering a question and a need.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Right. So our robot will be $15,000 as opposed to $2.2 million. That makes it accessible. You can have, with our device, you'll probably have multiple of them, but the price, you can afford to have multiple of them, and wherever they're actually needed, where the volume is there, where the patient need is there. And I think that's true of, like I said, other therapeutic areas we plan on moving to in the future, because it'll be, once again, if you have the volume to justify, having the volume to justify a $15,000 investment or a $20,000 investment is completely different than having the volume to justify a multi-million-dollar investment.
Is there an area in healthcare that we tend to see a higher rate of less than optimal intubations and outcomes, like ICU, ER? Take me through that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So most of intubations happen in the operating room, but about out of the 30 million, about 4 million happen in the ED and ICU, and clinicians do fewer of them. So even by that in and of itself, they're worse at doing it. And on top of that, their patients, are physiologically difficult. They're, already starting out with low oxygen stats. Already, they're behind the curve already when they decide to intubate. And they're not an ideal environment. It's not as planned as it is in the operating room. When they decide to intubate, they just have to go and get it done. And as a result, their stats, we talked about, 10% first pass failure rate in the operating room. That's 20% plus in the ICU. And the complication rate as a result is also over 20%. And in a recent study of only, I think, 7 or so 100 patients, they had patients die due to intubation failures, and that's wild in that low of a number of cases. So.
And we were chatting about this before, as a pilot, and you hear about terrible crashes that occur, but anybody who's a pilot knows that the last event before the crash was not the cause of the crash. It was usually what seemed to be a minor oversight that then you get behind the airplane.
Right.
And then things start to happen really fast.
Yep.
And I get that sense in an ICU or ED.
Yeah, and and even in the operating room as well, right? Like the moment the patient's O2 stats start dropping while you're trying to intubate, everybody gets more stressed. And as a result, more mistakes start to stack up. They as they go through, right? And that's the idea with our devices. You make it consistent, the same every time, so that even the lowest skilled clinician can have a high degree of confidence. And that's one thing we saw in our Lithuania clinical study, which was really, I've launched plenty of medical devices, but about 4 to 5 cases in, the nervousness with our device and the intubation subsided. We took some of the most difficult intubations that you can think of. And like I said, if you look at the clinicians, we took videos of them intubating. They're incredibly comfortable, incredibly confident. Nobody's nervous about it because even in 4 or 5 cases, they were able to get a degree of confidence in the technology and device. Like, okay, this is going to be easy. By comparison, it takes, from what I understand, about 50 to 60 intubations with a video laryngoscope to be considered proficient at it.
I don't want to be the first 10 on that person's,
exactly.
sort of list.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and in the emergency departments around the U.S., we were just talking to the person that runs Stanford's. They get 30 intubations a month. So that means on a per doctor, per resident level, they only let the residents intubate because otherwise those residents are not going to get experience intubating. And based on however many residents, they only get so many intubations per month to intubate. And so unless you're lucky and those residents also find time to practice on a mannequin occasionally, they might have not done one in a couple of months. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden they're intubating in a crazy emergency situation. That's when they saw our device. They're like, oh, we would just use this on every single one because it's not worth it for us to risk it.
It's interesting. Whenever I have conversations with entrepreneurs and our technology, I always seem to jump to another subject that I have a lot of experience in. But when you're nervous, you get a hormonal dump. Yep. And in that hormonal dump, and I don't care who you are, in that hormonal dump, your complex motor skills become compromised, right? You have primal, and then you have fine motor skills. And if any of us have ever been in an argument with a significant other, and we were trying to put a key in the door while we were arguing with somebody, we couldn't quite find the key.
Yeah.
And if you've got something going sideways, unless you're extremely experienced and manage that hormonal dump, yep, right? Then now you're going to be, no matter what you do, highly susceptible, and you're nervous. It becomes this self-fulfilling flywheel of inability to execute.
Yeah, and that's what, if you look at one of the key stats in intubation is first pass success. So being successful the first time. The chances of complication with the patient go up tenfold for every subsequent attempt. And that's exactly why, like, because you go in thinking, I got this, and when you don't, then all bets are off on whether or not, and I've talked to some clinicians who say, you know, they've had a bad episode where like they had trouble to intubate the patient, and then they wind up either canceling the surgery or something. And then like, it messed me up for a month because I lost my mojo, I lost my confidence in intubating. And so then I was nervous going into it. And so they're a big supporter because they're like, yeah, with a device like this, you can have the confidence that you will get it right every time. And just that peace of mind alone is worth it.
Yeah, well, I mean, Rory missed that 4-footer on the 18th at the Masters, but got a second shot at it, right? So it's the same thing, you know, if our venture capitalists and our surgeons, docs, are usually golfers. So you're standing at 18 in the club championship over a 6-footer, and you're starting to get the yips. Well, you're going to get the same thing here. Yeah. So what's the go-to-market look like? What's the regulatory strategy, and what's your go-to-market on this?
From a regulatory perspective, the robot joystick controlled class 2 device, we've had multiple pre-subs with the FDA, very straightforward, no clinical data required. So we plan on, we will have FDA clearance by the end of this year.
Oh, okay.
And then obviously the AI elements will come in the future, and we might have to do it multiple hops until we get to just press a button and intubate. But based on some recent work we've done on cadavers, we've made actually huge leaps and bounds. So we very recently did a cadaver lab where we did 3 cadavers, and the AI recognized the anatomy in all 3 of them and was able to intubate all 3 of them with ease. So that was a huge leap forward for us, and it's actually really exciting about the progress that we're making there. As far as commercialization, we just brought on Trey Gordon, who will refine our commercialization strategy as our Chief Commercial Officer. But the overall idea is get started in the operating room where you can see a high degree of difficulty. So your ENT surgeries, your neurosurgeries, where you have, you know, obstructive sleep apnea patients, head and neck cancer patients, and so on, where you have a high degree of difficulty. The surgeons there also see the difficulty and recognize it. So we have a lot of ENT surgeons who support our device, as well as the anesthesiologist. And start there, you know, we had our clinical study in Lithuania that went really well, also in the operating room. Once we get a little bit more time in the operating room, then go ICU, emergency department, where the need is greatest. But making sure that the clinicians in the ED and ICU feel comfortable adopting this technology. We'll probably need to do some clinical work, some clinical studies, but also just get more patients under our belt before you reach for this in an emergency situation.
Sounds like a practical approach.
Yeah.
And the total addressable market for this, as you see it?
So about 6.3 million patients a year, which would be about $2.5 billion for us.
In the U.S.?
In the U.S. alone, exactly.
Wow, outstanding.
And that's, you know, that's just getting started as I see it, where that's what this technology is capable of. Over time, with other products, I think we can expand that substantially.
So this sets up potentially for a platform technology beyond just a single product?
Exactly, yeah. So obviously, moving into video laryngoscopes and the like makes sense just so they can only have one device. But then the more exciting stuff for me is you know, handheld robotic bronchoscopes, as well as other therapeutic areas such as otolaryngal surgery and so on. We'll have a lot of opportunities there, and we have a lot of great ideas on how to get this platform usable in those scenarios.
Well, if you're spending enough time in that geography and you're employing AI in that, there's a lot to learn, and that rate of acceleration per unit of time is going to be really valuable.
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming over to 160 Studios.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm Joe Mullings from 160 Studios. Be well.